Come fly with me, let's fly away. If you can use some exotic booze, there's a bar in far Bombay. Bruce started his exclusive car hire company in his early 20s. The idea was simple, hiring exclusive cars to exclusive people. To those who had the money to afford, for a day or more, to drive about in a Porsche, Aston Martin, Lamborghini, a Bentley. Clients ranged through from the occasional fantasist to those wanting to impress for whatever reason, individuals whose personal wealth made hiring a mark of car they also owned and drove an easy choice when ensconced on a business trip to the city where Bruce offered his services. Money was to be made, plenty of money. Well-run high-end enterprises do so. Not an unattractive man, but he never married. There had been a significant number of relationships, none expanded into the permanent. A large listed detached house with ample gardens situated in a rural area some 20 miles out of town was proof of his prosperity. Mrs. Davis, who lived nearby in the village, acted as a non-resident housekeeper, taking care of all the things a wife, willingly or unwillingly, was responsible for. Bruce was content. Reaching 50, he decided to put a trustworthy, carefully vetted and responsibly monitored manager in charge of his business and promptly retired. Bruce had a secret. The dream of standing up center stage and singing just like the great performers who delved into the great American songbook. His collection of recorded music was extensive, representing exclusively the acclaimed male vocalist of the 20th century. There was one room in the house Mrs. Davis was never allowed to enter, a small private cinema. It was furnished with 3 rows of comfortable chairs, 10 in each row. Their function was purely symbolic, the pristine red velvet seats never having been sullied by the buttocks of male or female guests. There were no guests. This was Bruce's private domain. A projector, a sound system capable of playing every available type of recorded media. Heaven was entered not through a set of pearly gates, but solid oak double doors secured with expensive security locks. Bruce spent a good deal of his endless leisure time sitting in the front row centre, watching films from a carefully chosen library that went back even so far as the cinematic work of Al Jolson. Wrapped in song and dance, the masters swaddled him with contentment and yearning. Bruce was not an unknown face on the local music scene, attending gigs that featured big bands, small groups, any combo that included appearances by the most talented regionally based vocalists. It was at the conclusion of such an evening he asked a piano player for his card. Business plans had made up an integral part of his commercial success. The technique was now going to be applied to musical fulfillment. Contacts he made over the years, car hire to the affluent, provided all he needed to commence the action, though sadly minus the clapperboard. Scene 1, first take, action. A room to be hired on the first floor of a well-appointed and discriminating blue-tinged political club, where the click of double Scotch-filled glasses was more apparent than polemical debate. It was an ideal room, soundproof to a degree, a space for potential audience of 50 or more. Next, he bought quality microphones, top brand cam recorder and robust tripod, stage lighting with sufficient reach to illuminate a trio and singer. All was then ready. Next, a telephone call to the pianist and leader of a very accomplished trio. The day, the starting date, and a fee arrived at with some negotiation. This settled, the following day he drove over to a company who handled all the car hire firm's printed requirements. The boss, a stolid gentleman of advancing years, was slightly surprised by the nature of the commission, but business is business, and that's a fact. The posters arrived next week. Bruce booked and paid for a display advertisement in the local evening paper. The posters distributed, the advertisements published. Tuesday evening arrived, the opening night. The motor trade is mechanical and increasingly electrical and electronic, so he encountered no difficulties setting up the sound system, the lights, the camcorder fixed and pointed on its tripod with like an all-seeing eye. The room also sported a good quality piano. Hal, the piano player, discovered this to his approval, arriving half an hour before the announced commencement of the evening and playing a few exploratory chords and arpeggios. The drummer, the bass player, bruised in and set up. Bruce and Hal conferred about the charts. This was not going to provide any problems. Standard melodies for jobbing musicians are hardwired into their brains and hands. The order of the tunes was agreed and listed. Around 15 minutes to 8, a clutch of the curious drifted in and took their seats, the men clutching glasses of beer, the ladies appropriate drinks. Husbands and wives of a certain age, ever seeking to blunt the grey boredom of their daily lives. Interested in music? Of course. Knowledgeable fanatics? No. The grey dust of ennui clouding any evidence of animation. Bruce stood behind the camcorder, already set to record the entire evening without further adjustment, made sure the band and himself would be in focus, and clicked on the start button. The new suit, expensive and casual. The new shirt with a knotted tie that will be loosened and may even be discarded as the evening entertainment progressed. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, holding the acoustically balanced microphone just below and near to his bottom lip, in homage to the technique he'd watched so often within the privacy of his own screening room. Welcome from myself and the Hal Davis Trio. The 10 couples scattered about the room in tandem with 3 or 4 middle-aged singles clapped more out of expected convention than anticipation. Hal Davis played a 4-bar intro. A foggy day in London town had me low and had me down. I viewed the morning with some alarm. The British Museum had lost its charm. Nobody left before the last song of the evening, just the odd foray to replenish hot beverages at the bar on the ground floor. The Hal Davis Trio did their stuff to professional standard. Perhaps better not to ask musicians their opinions concerning vocalists. It was paid. The piano was a good one and regularly tuned. Running through familiar standards, it could often be much less agreeable. Bruce and the trio began to pack up their gear at the end of the evening. The audience drifted out into the night and home. Same time next week, guys? Bruce confirmed, readjusting his stage-managed tie. Weeks ran into months, months into a couple of years. An evening with Bruce and the Hal Davis Trio. Mainly the same faces, not young. An audience never greater than 30 persons. The bass player asked Hal one evening, when they were in the car park, how can he afford it? Hal, who knew something of Bruce's car The bass player asked Hal one evening, when they were in the car park, how can he afford it? Hal, who knew something about Bruce's car hire enterprise, replied, believe me, he can afford it. A bit of a drag, I must admit, but undemanding, and he pays well. And if it makes him happy, who are we? Indeed, it did make Bruce very happy. Every Sunday afternoon following on from the Tuesday, he would take his seat in his private cinema room and project the entire performance onto the screen, sitting alone, contented, single malt in his hand, warm in the semi-darkness. This routine went on month in, month out, until a slight niggle suggested to him the Sunday afternoon reprise could be in some way enhanced. The Wednesday following, the day Mrs. Davis took off from her domestic duties to go into the next valley to visit her sister, a medium-sized removal van drove around the circular gravel drive and halted outside of the front porch. Bruce had been expecting it. Just unload the boxes into the hallway, and I'll take care of them from there. The house was an old one dating from the 18th century, and there was a large rectangular entrance hall with doors leading off an enviable patinated oak staircase leading to the first floor. The driver was more than happy to comply. Easy offload, back to the depot in time for lunch. He dutifully stacked up the boxes, cardboard, coffin-sized, onto the indicated space on a large tasselled oriental carpet. The driver was full aware what the boxes contained, and did wonder. Not to be discussed by you or anyone was the instruction when loading at the depot. Understood? 29 rectangular boxes were piled in a loose block. Bruce thrust a high-denomination banknote into the hand of the driver and hastily ushered him through the front door. When the door was securely closed and he pulled at it several times to make sure, Bruce felt into his right-hand pocket of his jacket and pulled out a box-cutting knife, and with the deft movement of his thumb exposed the blade. He opened the box nearest to him. "Yes," he intoned with satisfaction. Prone within the box, a full-size, articulated window dresser's mannequin stared blue-eyed up at him. Female, fully and fashionably dressed. Bending down, Bruce carefully raised her from the box and almost reverently carried across the hall through the already open door of the well-lit interior of the private cinema. "I'll start here," sitting the avatar down in a seat on the front row of the array of chairs, and then returned to the hall to open the remainder of the cardboard boxes. It took less than an hour to unpack and then randomly seat the fully and fashionably attired mannequins, almost but not equal numbers of male and female. Bruce, his back to the open door, dimmed the room lights and gazed over the heads towards the faintly illuminated green. Most satisfactory. In less than another hour the boxes had been flattened and stacked, and at the back of the double garage, an area of the house Mrs. Navis never ventured into, Bruce found it difficult to have to wait until the following Sunday afternoon. When it did at last arrive, the pleasure of watching on screen his entire Tuesday evening performance was one of added pleasure. 29 unseen bright eyes, male and female, joining in his own rapt attention. Television in general bored him. Sport, perhaps. A quiz show now and then. One afternoon, pressing the remote button, an American comedy show popped up. About to change channels when a moment of supreme inspiration overwhelmed him. Converting this flash into usable reality was not particularly easy. However, connections, this time with people in the entertainment industry, bemused but unquestioning, gave him telephone numbers and a name here or there. The packing case containing the solution and means arrived by courier service directly from the USA during the middle of the next month. Assembling and fitting presented Bruce with no major problems. Bruce sat in his private screening room, immured from the Sunday grey and the rainy day outside. He remotely started the video of his Tuesday appearance. Bruce looked up approvingly at his high-definition image projected in full colour on the screen. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me welcome you to another evening of song. Myself and the Hal Davis Trio." Hal kicked into the first tune of the evening. Gently pressing a button fixed on the arm of his chair, Bruce, with a smile, activated a burst from the applause machine. "Once I had a secret love that lived within the heart of me. All too soon my secret love became impatient to be free.